Isn't that way? That looks about right. Hmm. Strange. Needs to be parallel, but the line there doesn't look horizontal, huh? Let's see. Shh! The professor's here. Shh! We're all a little off. Yeah, I think so, David. Oh, anyhow, still no Jim. Up on the mountain, still trying to get things put together. Don't know if Lauren made it back. Lauren, are you out there? Um, Last I heard, he was up on the mountain helping Jim. So we shall see. And so again, it's pretty much me again. Sorry about that, folks. I try and get some stuff, but everyone's just busy. That's the problem with up here. You have a season where you just got to work your butt off to get things done, and such is life. Let me check and see if I got any. Uh, Jay may be with us tonight. Yeah, still no assays. Waiting for assays to determine exactly what the point of attack will be out at Montana B for the immediate future. The preference is to go after dumps just because of the ease of mining. Uh, and we're, you know, got good weather right now, but that could change at any moment. Um, also have somebody that says he's got a mine in the southern part of the state that's at lower elevation and such and should have 12-month access. So we may do something down there this winter. Hello, Dave. How's it going? The samples are off to the lab, but haven't gotten any results yet. As a matter of fact, why don't I go ahead and let's see. Goodness gracious, there we go. Did you get the latest batch? I could really use some data by this weekend, if possible. Come on. Okay, so got that. Um, um, the second claim jumper has verified with BLM that, in fact, our claims are valid, and therefore he has asked that his claim be removed. So, okay, 2 out of 2. Hey, Chris, did you get those pictures Eva sent? She sent them to me, and I forwarded them on to you. And okay, good. Yeah, he did a little one. Getting gang back? Not really, but more of a, what is that, a train? One after the other. But anyhow, let's say It apparently is to a great extent being caused / exacerbated by the fact that the BLM is so far behind on their processing, and they've got this new MLRS system, MR whatever. This new land use system where they have more data to input, and one thing they want now is a map showing your claim on the section. And they, when we file some new claims, this was a new requirement. They sent us a letter asking for it. We sent it back, and it got put on a shelf somewhere, supposedly.
Supposedly.
So anyhow, they've been straightened out by BLM, and everyone's polite now, I guess. You can try the name, Dave, and I'll see if I can look it up. I've got a fair amount of information. If that doesn't work, then we'll try and get more in the directions. If you can give me a good idea as to what section or whatever, if that's convenient information, then that'll make sure I get the right mine. So yeah. Let's see what else. Let's see. We're still waiting on the assays to decide what to do mining wise. When it comes to the truck, today I got the spare tire rack fixed, but the spare tire is currently at the ranch because there's not enough room to put it in the back of the truck with all the stuff we have in there. So I plan on getting that tomorrow. I also put in a flex fan instead of a clutched fan in the truck in hopes that it'll make it run cooler at low speeds, which I'm doing a lot. And as usual, whenever I'm wrenching, I'm bleeding. Let's see, what else? Because everything's a little bit cattywampus. I wound up with a couple of days. I did some work to help out Lauren. He's just terribly busy right now. And so I was doing some stuff that's, it's not real technical, but it's real time consuming on a project he's working on. And so that should have saved him several days of labor. So he can, get a jump on things. Was pretty happy with how well it turned out. I was custom fitting some concrete pavers to a retaining wall situation, and it's those broken faced rounded blocks, so everything is custom. You can't predict anything. You got to take each one, make a template, transpose it to the block, cut it, set it in place, and then tweak it out. Because it's not only irregular this way, but also this way. You'll have stuff jutting out or pushing someplace, whatever. It's just really, really time consuming. So I was able to, it was kind of fun. Just something I can do to keep myself occupied without thinking about a lot of other things. Got 2 batches in the mill this week, and they still didn't get the assay done on the solution, but I just gave them that other one this morning, so hopefully we'll have it in a day or two. We'll have both of them.
That would be good.
So that'll help too. And I've got to repair the kiln again. One of the problems with an electric kiln is that you pretty much have to use metal tools in order to grab things. And if you aren't careful, you can short um, between the two elements. And I mean, I've done it. Even this is the first time she's done it. But when you touch those things, there's a spark. And the first thing you do is you want to jerk away. Well, that's the wrong thing to do with delicate heating elements that are glowing yellow hot. You go, stretch. So we'll have to see what the situation is. Depends on how brittle the elements are. We may have to make a new element, or we may just be able to trim off a little bit and run the ends down through the bottom and put new terminals on them. I'm thinking we're going to lose less than a foot of element that way. So it should be doable if the element is still flexible enough. The longer you use them, the more oxidation, the more brittle they become. And it just becomes a problem. And no, Rock, chocolates don't work because she's on a low carbohydrate diet.
They make low carb chocolate. It only costs 3 times what other chocolate does.
What I did do was I made some low carb enchiladas that she seemed to like. And that worked out well. I actually do that on a regular basis, Rock. You know, just to let her know that I'm thinking of her. But let's see what else we got going. Say the mill's pretty much routine right now. We did do a test with zinc in the Eco Gold X solution. We ran between 200 and 400 gallons of solution through it, probably in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 parts per million. The one test we had run was running 5.9 in and 4.95 out, which should have given us something like half a gram of gold. But Eva got, well, how big was that bead?
The bead that still needs to be parted was only 1/3 of a gram.
Okay, so she got a 1/3 gram bead that is silver in color. So, hey, Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
You like that? I was pretty happy with the results. I thought it turned out pretty well. Hopefully, it won't be too hard for you to mortar that in. When you're dealing with leach solution, that is a small amount. The solution would first going through the zinc and then going through resin cartridges. So it's not like we were going to lose anything. Okay. With a 4 cartridge setup, that first one we can do experimental stuff. The next thing is probably going to be if we can get consistently high grade solutions to take some of the old resin that's sitting there still damp in Ziploc bags and put it back in circuit to see if we can load it even higher. But again, that's why we have that. The 4 cartridge setup is more to allow us to use the first one as a test cartridge than it is to get more recovery. Although we do get that too. It gives us a little more cushion to allow that first cartridge to load up before moving things forward. But yeah, I'm glad I could help out, Lauren. So the zinc doesn't seem to have worked. Looking at that bead, I'd say it's probably at least 50% silver. So
well, that works for me. I like silver.
Yeah, she likes silver, but it's not the amount that we would like to see overall. That would mean there's like 1.15 grams of gold max. The other thing is we dissolved in hydrochloric acid. So residue should have contained some silver chloride, but I say we're really kind of feeling our way here with the chemistry. I'm not a very good chemist, and so we're trying different things as things go, and you go like, "What the hell just happened?" That's not what I was expecting. But anyhow, John. So yeah, I say the testing was done in such a way that unless the zinc poisoned the resin for some bizarre reason, it shouldn't have been a problem. I really don't know, Rock. No, we really didn't change anything except maybe the ore, but some of the ore, according to the assays previously done, okay, that one, the silver is many times the gold. The next one, the gold is good, the silver is 0. The next one, silver is greater than the gold. The next one is silver slightly greater than gold. Silver slightly less than the gold. Well, silver 3 times the gold.
Doesn't get in the
I know. Silver 1/5 the gold. I say so. There's enough silver there to cause an issue. The thing that we noticed was that the silver didn't seem to load into the resin as well as the gold. It got correct, Chris. It seemed almost like the silver was being kicked off the resin. We're not having the solutions assayed for silver. Did we ever do that multi-element analysis? We did on the.
You did on one of them.
On one of the solutions, yeah. It didn't show that much. But anyhow, so we're really not sure what's going on. The resin is chlorine preconditioned. Not really surprising, I guess. Possibly. I really don't know. I agree, Rock. It seemed like it got kicked off by something else that was preferentially depositing. I haven't watched any of his lately. I've seen a couple announcements. I've just been so busy. I say today I worked on the truck a bit, which I hate. But I got everything done that I wanted, and the flex fan is cooling it a lot more than the clutched fan. The issue isn't that big a deal right now, but during the summer when it was like 90 degrees, hey Shaggy, especially going uphill on a dirt road, a rough dirt road, Jeep trail, pulling a trailer, the RPMs were so low that the engine was really getting hot. I mean, a lot hotter than you want it to. So, I don't know. In the wintertime, I can put in a hotter thermostat and stuff like that. There's ways I can do it. And so we shall see when we get back in the field. Right now, I also have, well, I don't have a spare tire, although I now have a spare tire rack as of this morning. Spare tire is out at the ranch. I do have a tire that has a little bulge in the sidewall right next to the bead. So, oh yeah, I've got a 4-core copper brass radiator, John. I got the biggest, baddest radiator that will fit in that thing. Was it clutch bad? I don't know. It was brand new. I tried that first. I'm not a big fan of those viscous coupling clutches because when it gets hot, when you turn the engine off and you see the fan still spin, not impressed. I haven't the faintest, Chris. It doesn't say. You go to the store and you say, I need a new fan clutch. And they give you a thing that bolts in place. Oh, I'm not trusting the tire rock. I'm not going to be towing a trailer until I get it fixed. I'm keeping my speeds down. As far as I'm concerned, that thing could go at any time, which is why I need to get out to the ranch and get my spare. I have no idea, Chris. If so, it didn't have a big red sticker saying, this is the temperature. That's all I know. As far as I know, there is no set temperature. Those would be the ones with the little springy thing on. They don't make those anymore that I see. It's got like a viscous coupling, kind of like your torque converter in the transmission. So, I don't know. I'll say right now, no clutch. It's definitely running a lot cooler. Now we'll see if I can keep it from getting too cold. I understand, Kodak. Unfortunately, to get a new tire from the manufacturer, which is warranted, I go to Walmart, which is where I bought it, and they tell me that they can get it here by Friday. So until Friday, I either don't go anywhere or go carefully. Once I get the spare tire on, then, things happen. Definitely not pulling a trailer until I get a new tire on there. Hello, Joshua. And I say, I understand that thing can go anytime and can go suddenly, not just psst, but boom. Is the kick down working on the gearbox? Do you mean the shift points on the transmission tricky? If so, it's still being a little funky there. I probably need to take it in and get the transmission fluid replaced. Probably should have it flushed by now. Well, I say that's what, if I got a spare tire, if it blows, I just put the spare on. I got to go 8 miles to get my spare tire. It'll probably make it. If not, I'll call Lauren.
So was Warren happy with his bricks?
He was very happy, he said. So anyhow, I say right now the plan is take it easy, take it local, get a spare tire, and just be ready for it to blow at any time. Don't trust it. And luckily, I usually drive pretty slow anyway. Yeah, it has a tranny cooler on it. Yep. So it's easy to tap into the lines and do a flush. If low RPM and high gear and you accelerate, then the box should down. Yeah, it's shifting just fine with the exception of first gear, low throttle setting. It tends to hang in first gear a little longer before it upshifts. Put it a higher throttle setting, it shifts just like you'd expect it to. It upshifts, it downshifts, pretty fine otherwise. I say it's just that one shift point is a little funky. Not sure what it is. Check your vacuum lines.
This is a good point.
Good point.
Vacuum is a thing.
Check vacuum on truck. That makes sense. The engine that blew up, well, that would have some various things. This is the same engine that had the head gasket failure last year. This is the engine that got overheated not too long ago. And, but it's one of those things that seems to be running. It's missing right now, but I got to check the plugs and wires and such too. I need to get one of those stupid pliers where you can pull the spark plug wires off without getting zapped into next week. They're easy to get to, but boy, you don't want to pull them off. How's the advance acting? I wouldn't know, Chris. That would be Venturi vacuum, not manifold vacuum. So, as I say, there's a number of things that really need to be done to it. Part of the issue is, again, we're just trying to get as much stuff done mining as possible. Get things, once the weather closes in, then the idea is to start working on the darn thing. Although, if I can get a few hours over there in Lauren's shop, sometime this week would be nice in the afternoon after he's done working. Hello, Richard. Then we got some spring bushings I could replace too. While he says, just go ahead and use the shop if you need. I don't know where the tools are or anything like that. The problem with doing it when Lauren's there is he generally grabs the tools himself. Yeah, I'd be perfectly happy to do it.
Nothing is labeled.
No, I think that would be the, and I think it's an Eludium PU-36 explosive.
It's an Eludium PU.
Eludium, not a uranium. Yep. No, that's the tranny modulator. But anyhow, so Assay, if we can.
It's the Eludium PU-36.
Get a couple hours over there. We're using an impact wrench and an air chisel and stuff. We should be able to replace those spring bushings fairly easily, but of course, that's easy to say. Today, when I was changing out the fan, first of all, I don't know who the idiot is who came up with the idea when you're going to take the fan usually comes, the hub on the water pump has 4 studs on it, which makes life real simple. You just put things on there, tighten it up. Piece of cake, right? Well, to put the flex fan on, you need a spacer in there to get the fan in the same spot when you no longer have the clutch assembly in there. And so you have to put in this spacer and a fan, everything. And so it comes, you buy the spacer with the fan, separate item. It comes with bolts, not studs. Holy crap. How do you line up the water pump hub, which spins, of course, the water pump pulley, the spacer, and the fan all lined up all at once and get the bolts started? Good luck. So what I did was I took a piece of 5/16 wooden dowel, cut some 3-inch pieces, trimmed the ends, one end down a little bit, and screwed it into opposing holes in the water pump hub, which gave me assembly dowels. With those, I was able to stack everything up there, get 2 bolts started and snug enough to hold everything in place, and then just hand spin out the wooden dowels. And that was fine once I did it. Luckily, I had some 5/16 dowel. But then, as I was putting the belts back on, I realized one of the mounting bolts on the power steering pump was loose. and couldn't get it. It's like, what the heck? It's either broken or it's pulled out of the block. Turns out it was too short, and it pulled out of the block. It had pulled a little chunk of block with it, and then messed up the threads. Luckily, I was able to get a tap in there, chase the threads that were still in the block. There's plenty of threads in the block, and put in a longer bolt. And as I say, that worked out okay. But that was kind of annoying. Luckily, I even have a tap and die set on the truck. But anyhow, so I got everything done that I was planning to do today, except the tire. I was at Walmart, but they don't have it. It'll be Friday before it shows up. I was hoping to be heading out to the mine on Friday. We shall see. If we're just getting dumps, we'll still have plenty of time. Good Lord. It's so frustrating, kind of spinning your wheels a little. Okay, that didn't do it. Why is, for some reason, Dave, you're okay. That's what it was. I'm at the wrong spot. But anyhow, so I'm in kind of a holding pattern right now. You bet, Tricky. Good luck. Let me know how it all works out.
Kiss the babies.
Yeah, an awl can sometimes work, but in that particular situation, it's so tight and so many 4 different pieces. Trying to line one piece up isn't too bad with an awl, but 4 different pieces, wow, that was fun. So anyhow, no big news from the lab that I'm aware of. Any big news, little one?
No big news from the lab.
No big news yet. We're doing another zinc test with sulfuric acid digestion. Yeah, we'll figure it out. I've got the non-metallic stainless steel bowl for the electrode.
We have to get a cast iron.
Fly.
We have to get a cast iron.
Ooh, yeah, that's right. Cast iron skillet. You can get that tomorrow. Oh, and I got to get the claim staking stuff. Let's see. I need 5 posts. Yeah, pint jar. And 5 half-inch rebar. Got to get that tomorrow too. Yep. The claim holder wants me to stake another claim for him up yonder direction. So I'll get the stuff for that and go do that. Luckily last week, the rain did not hit the ranch with all the ore just sitting out in the open. So thank goodness I didn't have to deal with wet ore. It was still dry. That was a good thing. Now, Eva did notice that the last batch we did had lower consumption of Eco Goldex, correct?
The consumption was yeah, the actual mean consumption was lower.
Yeah. And it smelled a little different.
The consumption curve was totally different, and it did not smell. So I've started working on a smell chart.
She's now, taking notes on the smell of the tank. That had a lot of material from dumps in it. It was 2/3 dump material, and those are going to have a lot of weather leaching. You got broken rocks sitting out in the weather for decades. So it might have something to do with more soluble minerals. Don't know. But anyhow, so say we're trying to play games there. Um, and we should be back at should be back at the ranch tomorrow. Wednesday, probably be staking a claim. Thursday, back at the ranch. And hopefully Friday on our way down to the mine to haul some dump material. If that lower dump turns out the way I hope it does, then we can move a lot real fast. Yeah. It's going to be a little slower because I got to screen it. So 60% of it gets screened out. Gold will stay in solution. Why would that happen, Rock? I mean, they use it in the zinc precipitation in the Merrill-Crowe process for cyanide complex. Why would the zinc not pull out the gold from an Eco Goldex solution? Any ideas on that? Okay, Dave, let me switch over here. Okay. Let's see. There's one near Corbin. There's one near Silvergate. Sorry, folks. I'm just trying to. Where's the. Man, it's got the lead file number. I don't see the township section and range. Well, that's useless. Goodness. Okay, let's see. Is this near Silvergate or Corbin, Dave? Lower left corner, huh? Oh, yeah, it's that stupid way they do it. Okay, so it's 32, 27, I'm guessing that's a 2 and a 7, not a 20 and a 70. Just guessing. Because that would seem a lot farther west than where I think you said it was. Let's see. Let's see. Where's the damn? No, that one's not it. Let's try this one near Corbin. Okay. That doesn't match either. Wow. I will have to do a little research, Dave. It's not just showing up real simple. Ah, cool, Zeoxio. Yeah, Dave. That's how I'm going to have to do a little more research. It's not suitable. Everyone just going, huh? He's just mumbling to himself while I'm doing a thing. But okay, and that's I say I'm pretty sure this is it. That's over by the Jefferson River, right, Dave? Yeah. Okay, Zeoxio, sounds good. Yeah, that would be Twin Bridges on the Jefferson River, right, Dave? So yeah, Zeoxio, that would be great. I'll go ahead and email them once you get me the email. We'll discuss things and see what they're interested in doing and how we can work this to our mutual advantage. Yeah, that getting the gold out of the resin thing is. They're doing construction primarily. Okay, Dave, thank you. Chris, they're doing construction primarily now for housing geologists and things like that. This weekend, I guess they were putting in a water line. I think they're bringing in an old military barracks or something like that. But right now, it's mainly in the construction of physical housing type facilities phase instead of field work and such. Okay. Okay, got it, Dave. Yeah, exactly. They're putting it like a base camp, but it's going to be a little more substantial than just a bunch of tents or something. And so I'd say they're kind of racing the weather right now, which is why Lauren was up there helping them out. And I was over here helping Lauren out, this and that. It's that winter. If you knew exactly what was going to happen, you could schedule things a lot better. But as I understand it, here in Helena, at any time, winter could close in and we could just get shut down. Okay. That's my understanding. So I say we're all just racing like madmen, trying to get everything we can done while we can. Let me just check the weather again, make sure that the temperatures are going to be above freezing for the foreseeable future. Through Friday, yes. Beginning of next week into the 20s, little one. We're going to have to pull those resin cartridges.
Yep. Kind of figured that.
Probably on Thursday, we'll need to bring them in. I mean,
I was planning on bringing them in by default starting Tuesday
that's fine.
because you never know.
Yep. And yeah, because they're designed to be brought inside. And your gold claims drill test 1 million ounces. Now, that statement is a little bit incomplete. So I am guessing what you're saying is the drilling program that was done previously indicates a resource containing 1 million ounces. Is that what you're trying to say? Because, okay, what is this, hard rock or placer? And what is the average grade that you're talking about? These are important variables. As said to the shareholders, that's not too bad, because there are certain legal requirements. But again, 1 million ounces in the ground doesn't mean 1 million profitably recoverable ounces right off the bat. It also doesn't mean proven reserves. It could be indicated or geologic or things like that. So, and say what kind of deposit is it hard rock or placer? Is it a high grade or a low grade deposit? All of these things are substantial variables that will change things. It's lode, okay. Says it's lode. Yeah, Chris is asking a lot of questions that need to be answered before much can be done. And the first thing is, what kind of grade are you talking about? And what are the dimensions? Oh, you don't know anything. Okay, that makes it a little more complicated. Okay, thank you, Zudoxio. Do you have a report or something that you could email to, let's say, Rock Butcher? Rock is a lot more qualified than myself, but both me, Rock, or Chris, and I don't know, Goldstream, I don't see him here, but there's a number of us people that can look at that and give you a lot better idea as to what they're actually saying in the report. When they're making a shareholder report or a public statement, they have to be pretty careful exactly how they word it. Now, they love to shade it as much as they can. But it's one of those things that by looking at the report, we can have a much better idea of what it is that is known and what needs to be known. Yeah, I believe it, Zioxio. He's in a full semester class about how not to get scammed when buying a mineral property. Yeah.
Hey, we want to see the course materials, dude.
That's right. Forward us the course materials. He's a rock butcher. He butchers rocks. He tears them up. Although he's actually more of a rock surgeon, being an exploration geologist as opposed to a production miner. I'm more of a rock butcher. He's more of a rock surgeon. Yeah. You have my email, I presume, Poker Face. um, so, let's say if you get some information, you can send it on to me and I'll give you my opinion free of charge. Man. Oh, I see. You're just giving a um, example of how they could word it, Chris. You're absolutely right. They can do that and be true. That's why you need to look at the details and see whether it's a reasonable um, interpretation or a rather extravagant and unlikely um, circumstance. Um, I have seen some stuff. It's like, well, we're within a mile and a half of the historic town of Tombstone where they mined gazillions of ounces of gold and silver. And it's like, so what? You know, the question is, what's on your property? So, yeah, I've seen a lot of promotional stuff that's pretty, shall we say, optimistic, and other stuff that's a lot more reasonable. Usually, when it's internal, like to shareholders or to the head of the exploration department, it'll be a lot less speculative. But when they're trying to sell shares, it can get really speculative. See, right there indicates that they didn't see the probability of a large ore body. Okay. Now, on the other hand, 1,000,000 ounces in the ground to a big major, to a major mining company is, not necessarily a huge thing. Like, especially if, maybe only a third of it or less appears to be economically mineable. The question doesn't matter how much is in the ground. The question matters how much they can get out of the ground and make a profit doing it. Yeah. I'd be willing to bet you do, Rock. Yeah. And then you probably run it by a legal department too, unless, say, if you're an independent consultant, you got to be really careful. Exactly, John. Uh, just because the big boys walked away from it doesn't mean it's not nothing, but it means it didn't look like a really big thing to them. Yes, it could be, or it could be overly optimistic, but that doesn't mean there might not be something small but valuable included in it. A small high grade deposit that could be possibly mined on a small scale quite profitably. And I say it's just a matter of some companies have some pretty strict criteria that they go by. And if it doesn't meet those, they just throw it away and they don't care. And it could still be pretty good, especially in terms of in certain small locations. Yeah, I mean, $20 million is nothing to a big mine. But yeah, 20 million sounds like interesting to me. Say so. Say, get us some more details. We'll give you our best interpretation of what we can see. Yeah, well, I say, get us some more details, Poker Face, and we'll look at it and see what we can do to give you some guidance. Because I say it could be just fine for a small operation. That sounds about right, Zeoxio. He says, I saw a presentation on a gold mine in Alaska recently, the Pogo mine. The previous owners ran it into the ground and sold it for pennies. Northstar purchased it and is making a killing mining it. Yeah, there's no project so good that an idiot can't screw it up. Never underestimate the power of human stupidity or arrogance. But you also have to watch and make sure you don't lead yourself astray through wishful thinking. Yeah, pretty much, Lars. Did you ever get that door up? Cool, Rock. Yeah, I'm just wondering, Lars, you ever get that door up? Yeah, well, John, let's say it's a matter of grade. Also, there's a certain advantage if you're in an old mine that you're not doing a surface disturbance necessarily. Understood, Pokerface. So it's just something that you have to constantly monitor yourself for. And, it's like this Montana bee. When I get down there and I see that vein is really shrunk up, it's like, okay, time to reevaluate. We knew it was, I don't know if you'd call it a crapshoot, but it's like just, it's speculative to project such things without drill results and such. But since we could mine it cheaper than we could drill it off properly, we figure what the hell. And the fact that it changed its character suddenly means we need to reevaluate. It doesn't necessarily mean pull off or whatever, but especially with it being late in the season, if we can switch to dumps and get as good or better grade than we're mining overall down in the hole with a lot more tonnage, yeah, that's the thing to do. Especially if it's just, the dumps are only going to last so long, but right now we don't have long to go. Well, what I really want is a diamond tooth rock gopher that can also smell gold. See, now that would be really cool, Chris. That would be way cool.
I want a horta that eats rock and poops gold and silver.
Did you hear that, Chris? She wants a horta, a trained horta.
That eats rock and poops gold and silver.
Cool, Poker Face. We'll help you what we can. We just way short of information to make any kind of statements about anything. What we're planning to do, Rock, there's 2 dumps that we're looking at. What we're hoping for is the dump that's right on the road that we can get the quad on. Looks to be spillage from what I call the lower decline dump. Ahorta was in Star Trek.
They mine.
And they mine by dissolving the rock. Yep. And to get back to the dumps, the lower decline dump upgraded pretty well when we screened a 1/2 inch minus. Um, let's see. If we had 1 unit of gold per ton in the dump sample overall, we got 2.6 units of gold per ton in the 1/2 inch minus, and 1/2 unit of gold per ton in the 1/2 inch plus. So the idea is to screen it to 1/2 inch minus, use the 1/2 inch plus to fill some area there and give us a good turnaround, so that we can, instead of doing a 3-point turn with a quad, we can actually do a U-turn so we can haul a trailer. The upper decline dump, the preliminary tests indicated that although the average grade was about the same as the original test, which was like a bucket from the lower decline dump, it did not upgrade with screening. Okay. So the last trip that we just did, we got about 500 pounds of each, a little bit more from the lower one because it's a lot easier to shovel and throw it right in the quad. And so we got big samples. I took them to the ranch, screened them to 1/2 inch minus, and then as I was crushing them through the Stutenroth to put them into the tank, I would change the sample bucket. When I changed sample, I'd kind of let it run clean and then take the sample bucket out, put in a new sample bucket. And that way I'm getting a continuous sample of finely ground rock. With the middle decline dump there ran about 2.5 buckets of 1/2 inch minus to, I'm thinking 7 buckets. We wrote it down, of 1/2 inch plus. The lowest dump, the one we're calling the road dump, it ran about 40% 1/2 inch minus. So hopefully that runs good grade, and we can just, screen it, put it in buckets, throw it in the quad. And so we shall see. Again, I'm waiting for the results even as we sit here. The assayer Hiddle, he usually gives us the assays on Sunday nights. I figure he's got a weekly routine. But this week there was we had Columbus Day, and not this week, but the week before. And then didn't get the stuff in the mail until like Wednesday. So don't know when he got the samples. They should be in his hands right now. I sent him an email. I was telling him, I really could use those results by this weekend to see how fast he can get it done. He's usually pretty good. Well, I think it all depends on where you go, but I think it's like Indigenous Columbus Peoples Day or something now. I don't know what the heck they call it. If you can't even figure out what you're going to name your holiday, should you even have it? All I know is everyone's closed. Pain in the butt. But anyhow, so once I get those numbers, then I'll know what to focus on. And until then, I'm not sure. I really want it to be that bottom dump. And eliminate history, eliminate facts. That's part of this thing. It's like, well, everything's an opinion. No, it's not. Some things are right, some things are wrong, some things are correct, some things are incorrect, some things have numbers, you know, and like that. And some things are a matter of opinion, and some things are just a matter of preference, you know. Um, what's that thing in matters of taste? There is no dispute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
De
It-
gustibus non est disputandum.
Yeah, like she said in Latin there. But I mean, it's like taste. I mean, some of you guys like beer. I don't. I find the flavor of beer to be horrible,
Carbonated mule pig.
you know? But that doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm right or I'm wrong and you're right. It just means that for you, it's pleasurable. For me, it's not. End of story. So, yeah, I say there's some things that are purely a matter of opinion, and other things are not. Uh, yeah, exactly, Zioxio. Now, you notice the difference between Rock and Chris on this one. Again, they just have different tastes, and there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, biologically, it's a very good thing. It's that biodiversity within the population that means that when things change, there's always somebody who survives. Yeah, I agree, Zioxio. In general, I don't like the flavor of alcohol, but I can doctor up other stuff, you know. Well, John, then what you have to do is you got to calibrate it. You got to sit there and know how much, how fast to get what you want without getting too much. My problem's real easy. If I want some alcohol, I just get some cheap vodka and mix it with something that doesn't taste too bad. Voila, done. What always gets me is when people sit there and, like, this is real smooth tequila. It's like, really? It chokes me. But there are people who can can discern these things. But again, it's up to their biochemistry, not mine. So, I say a lot of people would not like how dirty I get mining. It would drive them crazy. On the other hand, doesn't bother me. I like digging through rock, you know. But um, other people can't handle the enclosed spaces and such. Again, doesn't bother me. They do make fermented mare's milk in Mongolia, I think. Isn't that correct, Rock? Okay, poker face. You want me to show it to you or just write it down? I'll write it down here. Here you go, poker face. And if you look at any of my videos, that's on there too. I'm not sure if it's the beginning or the end, but anyhow, there we are.
At the end, I think.
Yeah, I think it's at the end. Depends on which one. Some are not good for licking. Zioxio. And yeah, I did get your email. And this would be Dave mine. I got plenty to do tomorrow morning, that's for sure. Yeah, I would imagine, Rock. And but I also think that when people are raised with particular dietary things, they like them and their body adjusts to them and stuff. But if you haven't, it can be pretty daunting. I don't know. Would those be Colorado river toads, Lars? Uh, I think they're mildly hallucinogenic. I know they make your dogs salivate like crazy. Uh, uh, but anyhow,
Oh, y'all are weird.
of course we're weird. We're guys. Yeah, it was funny. Um, there's a particular YouTube channel I like to listen to or watch, and they had a guest on, and they were, I mean, these are all old military people, and this guest said, the intelligence of any group of young males goes down as the number of males increases. He says this phenomenon could become so bad that once you get around 10 or 12 guys, the cumulative IQ can actually go negative. I thought, how true. But anyhow, so that's kind of what we're up to right now. Yeah, Jeff, that sounds about right. Yeah, psilocybin is good.
Good grief, Bear.
Yeah, Lars, you see, that's a man sentence there. I won't even repeat it for Eva. So what are you going to do, Zioxio? Take out a Geiger counter and tell them that it needs to be replaced? Uh, become monks? Oh, a lighted walkway, huh? I don't know. But yeah, it's they still got lots on my plate, and there's a gentleman in Southern Oregon that would like me to come by. Well, he sets up his Eco Goldex system there. Um, and then there's a guy about halfway to Chris's house who would like me to take a look at his property over there in California. And then Chris would like us to visit if we could. So this fall, we might be able to make some kind of circuit. I was thinking of hitting Chris first.
I'd like to see Liberty.
And then Redding, then Oregon, then Liberty, then the Olympic Peninsula, and then the what do you call it? Muffle furnace up there in Anacortes. So that would be kind of nice. I need to get the truck working nice and reliably first. But yeah, we might have, a 10-day road trip sometime in the not too distant future. We'll have to see. Yeah, Tricky, that would be cool too. I'd like to go and visit you and your family, although I have a feeling it's not going to happen anytime soon. Are you going to bring up the thing we were discussing today on your
Which one?
with China?
I was going to touch on the issue.
Yeah. So
there are other issues that must be touched on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're hundreds and hundreds of miles from Lars, Chris. Yep. Anywhere near you? Closest would be Sacramento, Lars. So I say we'll have to see what happens. I'd love to do it, but we'll just have to see how everything works out, including money, the socioeconomic situation, and stuff like that. As you know, I'm concerned that things are a bit unstable right now. And if we went into California, we couldn't take the pistol. I don't. Wait a minute. Yeah. Well, you might be able to. Pistol and the shotgun, we could probably get away with under certain conditions. Yeah, I need to get over there too, Zeoxio, because I left a number of buckets of ore with camp, and I need to pick those up just to get them out of their way. They called me up once several months ago about it, but they haven't called me since. But yeah, I need to pick them up. If you're ever coming up here and you're driving a truck or something, camp has about, I don't know, 3 or 6 buckets of ore that you could bring up. But yeah, with your professors being interested in the situation, we might be visiting there pretty quickly, and might do something with Dave too. Well, that'd be great, Poker Face. I'd be really happy with that. But anyhow, as I say, life is interesting, and having a good time. Yeah, mine's a revolver though, and I know years ago you had to have it like locked in a box in a separate compartment, like in the trunk in a locked box with the ammunition somewhere else or something like that, and you could do that. And I say I really don't know, and I say I've got that 44 revolver and I got a 12 gauge pump with a 4-round magazine. So I don't think there's a problem with either of those, although there may be special procedures I have to adhere to. You know, for example, I may have to get a trigger lock or something. But, you know, okay, going to California, okay, lock the trigger. As soon as I get out of California, unlock them, you know, something like that. Great, Zeoxio. As I say, it would be nice to get a little bit of help with this project. Oh, Courtney Young? I think I talked to her.
Yeah, you talked to her.
Wait a minute. It says Mr. Courtney Young. Is it Mr. or Mrs. Courtney Young? Zeoxio? So I know I've talked to Courtney before. I think, let's see, let me see. Nope. Not seeing anything there. Huh. And Lawyer Nancy. That was from camp. That was a long time ago. I forgot who it was. I think it was Courtney.
Yeah.
That was the one that didn't seem to believe that you could.
Have gold to volatilize.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think because I wrote. Alex sent me like the head of the metallurgy department, something like that, and then that person referred me to someone else. Wow. Oh well, I'll figure it out. Okay, it's a Mr. Courtney is male.
Okay.
Yes, Tricky, that would be a problem in California.
Everything's a problem in California. This is a known fact.
Yeah, John, that sounds about right. Yeah, I don't know what the rules are, but I can find out. Let's see. In Ontario, can carry a pistol and claim that it has to be locked in a box until I get to the boundary. Then I can take it out and holster it. Yeah, that's the way it is. Well, they gave me a NATO 308 on squirrel. It'll work. You know. Yeah. Varmint hunting, the most politically incorrect sport, where you talk about things like hang time. That figures, Zeoxio. But anyhow, I say, yeah, I know that there's certain rules that are relatively easy to comply with as long as it's not, likely a semi-automatic weapon. Hey, Dan, how's it going? Let's see. I found the dimensions of that. Goodness gracious. Thought I wrote it down. But I'm pretty sure the steel plate was 6 inches wide, 14 inches long, with a 1/2-inch hole centered on each end, with the center of the hole a 1/2 inch from the edge of the plate, and then it countersunk. If you got all that. How long was recovery from the hernia surgery? With or without the testicle that had to be removed? In terms of just the recovery from the hernia surgery, mine was done laparoscopically, and the problem was, I say, mainly it interfered with the blood flow to my right testicle. Aside from that, I was feeling pretty good. What, about a week?
Oh yeah.
I was pretty much just having to keep from screwing things up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Half-inch from each end. So basically, if this was the plate, and this was 6 inches, and this is 14 inches, the center of the hole is a half-inch from the edge of the plate. The through hole is a half-inch in diameter, and it's countersunk. And so, I mean, this is really, the edge of the countersink is real close to the edge of the plate. That's just the way they're designed. But that's basically how it works. Correct, Chris? And each is the same? Yes. No, wear plates for the jaw crusher, Kodak. So anyhow, well, there's some stuff I really need to. I make these lists and just leave them on there until I get everything done. I'm looking at some of this stuff like, wow, it's been a while. Jeez. Wow. Holy crap. Oh, by the way, Prospector Trip picked up a motor last week. It's a brand new ball door, 3-phase, 20 horsepower motor, and with an 1.5-inch shaft. Last I heard, he was looking for about $800 for it. Yeah, John, and. So if anybody needs a 20 horsepower, 3-phase electric motor in good condition, because brand new, never been used supposedly, that, you might want to talk to Prospector Trip, because he's got one. The impactor is built with arms and wear plates go on the arms. That is correct, but that's not what these wear plates are for. These are the movable jaw plates for the RC46. What electrical specs? I do not know, Chris. It's 3-phase. All I know. You'd have to talk to him about it. But I say he's willing to part with it at a reasonable price, because he basically was thinking, if I can't get a good price, I'll just scrap it. So that gives you an idea. Did you figure out the plan for the rest of the year? Right now, the plan, Dan, is to mine dumps if possible. We're still waiting for assay results, because we can mine dumps so much faster than digging through bedrock. Don't know, Chris. You have to talk to Prospector Trip. You can go on his channel there and just drop him a a message, a reply, comment, I guess. Sorry. And I'm sure he can get you all that stuff. But say that's until the weather closes in. Again, move as much ore as we can, as good as we can, and load as much gold into as much resin as we can. And then once we get shut down, focus primarily on getting the gold out of the resin. In the meantime, Eva is focusing on getting to where she can assay gold in rock and give us a capacity we currently don't have. We will not be able to weigh the beads because that requires an expensive scale on a very stable foundation. But by measuring the diameter of the bead, you can infer fairly accurately the weight of the bead. And if you've done a proper job of parting, then you can assume it's pretty close to pure gold. No, Chris, you have not. Going to do any more testing in the mine? Seems unlikely this season. Again, we're trying to move a bunch of ore as quick as possible, and that's where we need to get ore moving, preferably from the dumps if the grade's there. And okay, let me try and the nice thing about mining dumps is it's real easy to do. Let's see. Okay, saved, Chris. Yeah, the brown soft stuff was pretty good. And it's hard to tell without a large number of assays, like 5 to 10. You don't have much of a statistical database with 2 or 3. But excuse me, we got some flies in here. We'll lift it. And so we're a little bit in the dark. We're trying to find out some more stuff. But once Eva can run her own fire assays, then we'll be doing a lot more sampling and assaying. We'll be running an assay every batch that runs through the mill, and every new kind of rock type I run into, I'll segregate some and grind up a sample for Eva so that she can test it. Right now, we're keeping splits of the various stuff we're sending off to the lab, and that way we'll have some known numbers to compare her results against. We may, Dan, that's entirely possible. And yeah, I know, but I hate shooting salt in the house. It's just, it doesn't seem right. If it was microsilica, very fine silica, like from the assay, that wouldn't be too bad. Well, that's pretty good, Polka Face. Sounds good. I understand, Chris. It also less likely to scratch surfaces. Yeah, if you got a 5-gallon bucket, if you get a half a thimble full of gold, you say, that's pretty high grade stuff, especially from a dump, you know. We may do that, Zioxio. The claim owner is perfectly comfortable making money different ways, and even seems to like the laboratory. Would you like to be running an assay lab where people bring in samples? And
Yes.
She says yes.
If I got certified and if I actually had decent equipment,
Yeah.
my lab is hoopty.
Yeah, she'd have to have a decent lab. Now, that's nothing. That guy in Oregon, he's setting up a serious assay lab. So it would be nice to pick his brain and see what he's doing too. Hopefully, within the next month, we'll have a good way of getting gold out of the resin, and that would be a real positive. But I say that's one of those things that we're just flying by the seat of our pants. Life is just kind of blowing us hither and thither, that sort of thing.
I'd like to run I'd like to run a lab whether I was doing the actual assays or not.
Yeah.
I'm good at process control. I'm good at paperwork.
Who certifies assayers? I'm not sure. There's probably the American Society of Certified Assayers or something. I know that laboratories have a certain international certification standard they're supposed to go. I mean, you know, if you're going to go to a serious company and do that, there's this particular international standard they have to meet. Yeah, I say there's something like that. I really don't. There's a lot of people who are not certified assayers. I know that. There's a lot of that going around. Oh, are you about ready to do your tinfoil hat report? Because I'm about ready to take a short break here.
All right. Just let me get out of my game.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too, John. Oh yeah, she's got her lab coat. Absolutely.
I wear my lab coat when I have something important to announce.
But it has to be a lab subject. Well, thank you, Polka. We try. Zioxia wants you to do a fashion walk with her new coat. Your fans. What can I say?
My thermometer is at the lab. My pocket thermometer.
Yes, your pocket thermometer is at the lab. See? Anyhow, she's going to take over for a little bit.
Howdy, howdy, folks. Welcome to this week's Dystopian Times. I hope everyone is doing well. Uh-huh. Absolutely, Rock Butcher. It certainly did. Actually, I've really gotten quite, I've got the resin assaying down. The resin is really a pain in the butt to assay. And I have good buttons. A lot of my buttons are coming out nice and shiny, and the slag just explodes right the hell off them. Oh, that reminds me. I discovered something really cool if I want to get the slag to explode off even more so I don't have to pound my buttons to get it off. As soon as I dump it into the mold, I cover it, I count to 30 in my head, Then I dump it out of my tray and I drop it in cold water. And the slag goes poof. And then I get all the slag out and weigh it, of course, because you weigh everything. But I end up with a nice, clean, shiny button that looks like a little mercury capsule that, that astronauts wrote in. They're so cute. Oh, he didn't change my sign. That bum. Slacker bear. He's a slacker, okay? What can we say? Actually, Shaggy, no, you'd be surprised. The slag actually doesn't explode all that badly, and the water does not heat up to the point where it even gets the container warm. It's really kind of cool. I figured it out kind of sort of by accident. For those who don't want to use that method, another thing that works if you use a whole lot of soda ash, my ratio of soda ash to grams of ore or material is at least 2 to 1. If you have a high soda ash content in your slag, then you can just drop your button in cold water and let it sit there a while, and the glass softens, and then you scrub it off with a steel brush. So you see, I like my buttons to be pretty. What can I say? I'm a chick. I should have pretty buttons. Mm-hmm. But that's the way that's gone. The assaying is actually going rather well. I'm gonna have my nice little ore beads to part this week. It should be interesting because I split my 1 assay ton sample into 4 parts so that I'd have 1 part to use for my reduction potential assay and 3 parts to do the rest of it, just to make absolutely sure that I can get a good average. No, he probably didn't bring enough ice cream for the whole class, Rock Butcher, because he is a greedy dude who eats all the ice cream. Okay.
This is yogurt.
Hi, blind dude.
With sucralose, whipped topping, and cherry pie filling.
He's insane. He should have stuck with my pickled cranberries. Okay, I make kick-ass pickled cranberries. We have other jars. Okay. Excuses. We have more jars than that. But yeah, things have been going well in Assay World, except for, of course, the furnace having a misfortunate series of events happen to it again. That happens sometimes. And it seems to be almost the end of stink bug season. I'm only having to throw about a dozen stink bugs out the door every day during the course of a day instead of 2 dozen. What I find interesting is this last batch of ore, as Professor Hardrock touched on, didn't smell the same, and it did not attract the stink bugs, even when I was assaying it. Normally, the amines, I don't know, those amines attract a hell of a lot of different kinds of bugs. It's really strange. But yeah, it didn't even smell right when it was being assayed. Very, very interesting. So I'm going to develop a smell chart. Not quite sure how I'm going to do this yet, but I'm going to develop a smell chart. Rock Butcher, he already likes avocados. If he ever started to like kale, I'd really worry. Okay? I mean, yikes. Kale is kind of not food. But
from near Mexico.
That's another story here. Well, in the category of with friends like this who needs enemies, the LBMA has spoken. For those who are not familiar, the LBMA is the London Bureau of Mineral. They're like COMEX. They sell metals. They manipulate the metals market across the pond. Okay? The LBMA has spoken. LBMA moves to support the world's artisanal gold miners. Oh. Be still, my beating heart. LBMA has proposed a series of concrete steps designed to realize its ambition shared by a wide range of miners, refiners, governments, NGOs, and other stakeholders. Really now. To encourage the inclusion of gold produced by artisanal and small scale mining, ASM, into mainstream supply lines. Some 40 million people globally are engaged in ASM gold mining, producing as much as 20% of annual mined gold. Keep that number in mind. LBMA has long supported the legitimization of ASM production, but has come to recognize that responsible sourcing programs have unintentionally marginalized the sector, due in part to rigorous sourcing standards, lack of engagement, and or refiners and buyers' concerns about reputational risk. The proposed steps should advance not only the governance of the sector, keep that in mind too, but also open direct market access for those who depend either wholly or in part on artisanally produced gold for their livelihood. The announcement follows the publication of a report by Gregory Mathembu-Salter and Dr. Thomas Salter of Fuzumoya Consulting towards an LBMA good delivery list for artisanal and small-scale responsibly mined gold. The external report was commissioned by LBMA and published today on the LBMA website, where you can also read the LBMA board response to the report. I suggest you do so. The Fuzumoya report makes 6 formal recommendations, which LBMA plans to employ as the basis of moves to support ASM producers. These include encouraging LBMA accredited refiners to develop relationships with processors and intermediate refiners approved by the Responsible Minerals Initiative. I wonder who that is. And to explore creating a good delivery list for such refiners. Moreover, the report recommends LBMA should engage with its GDL members to establish what they require from regulatory regimes, and then engage with governments, civil society, and other stakeholders in ASM producer countries to secure such reforms. LBMA also intends to work with the World Gold Council and its members to find ways mining companies can better support ASM miners and suppliers by providing logistical and initial smelting services. Oh, yippee! Yeah, yippee, skippy. For those who have missed the news, which is very hard to get since everything kind of gets memory hold above the regional level on this, this may or may not be tied to an ever-growing shortage of physical golds for banks to meet Basel III standards and for governments to sit on or pretend to sit on. May or may not be. It may or may not also be tied to the current efforts of NGOs to completely delegitimize artisanal mining in general by highlighting the criminal illegal mining activities that are going on in certain South American countries. This is actually rather fascinating because when you start digging into this, you find out a few interesting things. You find out that most of the illegal artisanal mining operations in said countries, along with quite a few of the legal ones, are controlled by criminal cartels. The criminal cartels have as their main economic impetus mercury smuggling. Because, of course, mercury is highly regulated, really dangerous, and very, very illegal. In some of these places, the illegal camps and the legal camps, the miners who have been lured there by the promise of being able to feed their families have to turn over all of the products of the day to their respective bosses, and they're given back just enough to survive on. They are not allowed to own retorts. As a matter of fact, having a retort in some of these places can get you killed. They have to burn up their mercury if they burn their mercury so that they have to buy more from the criminals. If they are turning over the amalgam, the mercury, to the bosses, they only have the boss's word as to how much gold is actually in it. And it's a fairly safe bet, as Professor Hardrock pointed out to me when we were discussing this issue, that the criminal cartels in question are likely retorting that mercury, extracting the gold, shortchanging the miners, and then reselling them back the mercury that they sold them the first time. This is what's going on here. So LBMA, along with COMEX and a few other people, are facing a critical shortage of physical gold. They're facing a shortage to the point where they put out this nice window dressing statement so that they can start bringing some of that 20% that artisanal miners produce into their coffers. The goddess has severe doubts as to the so called reforms. The goddess has even more severe doubts when she contemplates the idea of the regulatory regime that would be spread multinationally to further these so called reforms and secure the supply of this gold. The goddess really has doubts about the whole working with governments and NGOs because the more the goddess digs into this, the more the goddess notices that a lot of these government officials in some of these African and South American countries seem to have a lot of relatives that are closely tied to various unsavory elements. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. But it does say something about supply issues. That says something about supply issues, and so does the fact that if you happen to watch the COMEX numbers and try to make sense out of them, they're even worse than government math here, people. The COMEX registered silver is below 40 million ounces now. Now, eligible means it's silver they're storing in their vaults for somebody else, and they're paying you to store your metals there now, by the way, if you want to. But it can't be delivered, Registered is the stuff that can be delivered. Now, it's notoriously difficult to get COMEX to deliver a product anyway. There have been quite a few people over the last few years that bought a 5,000 ounce COMEX contract and requested physical delivery, and COMEX pulled some shenanigans, delayed them forever, said they had to hire armored cars, they had to have a certified vault for it to go to, and all this other ridiculous bullshit. And then sooner or later, either they got annoyed and said, all right, I'll take the cash value, or COMEX told them, well, we have to exercise our position that's in your contracts in 1.5 point type on page 837 to pay you the cash value in fiat rather than give you your physical silver. Very, very bizarre. A lot of weird shit goes on amongst these organizations. This is a known fact. But that is where we are today. The LBMA has decided that they need gold bad enough that they're going to work with just about anybody to get it. Good for them. Now, you would not know this was the case if you happen to go to Kitco's website. Remember Kitco? They used to deal in precious metals. Where, by the way, they say that gold closed at 1646 and silver closed at 1868. Well, if you go to Kitco's website, there's a nice long list of articles. A whole lot of those articles are not about physical metals at all. They're about crypto. No idea about that, but Bitcoin apparently is the best defense against the Great Reset. Fascinating. It's going to be awfully hard to mine Bitcoin when the price of energy is going through the roof the way it is, but who am I to argue with Kitco? After all, they're apparently an authority in the metals market. Maybe. Just saying, you know, at least their prices update more than anybody else's do. That's all I can say for them at this point. Vale beats output estimate in new blow to iron ore prices. Strange things are going on in iron these days. Vale SA, the world's #2 iron ore producer, churned out more of the steelmaking ingredient than expected last quarter to add further pressure to prices that have been battered by recession fears. The Brazilian mining giant produced 89.7 million metric tons, topping the 87.2 million ton average analyst estimate. The result was also well ahead of the previous 3 months and slightly more than a year ago. Vale also saw sharp gains in nickel and copper output. In a report Monday, the Rio de Janeiro-based company attributed the iron ore output growth to dry weather in northern Brazil and higher third-party purchases and production in the south. Still, sales came in well below output, which Vale put down to transiting inventories along the supply chain. Concerns over the cooling impact of higher interest rates, as well as China's zero-COVID policy and a recent push for pollution curbs, have iron ore futures trading near their lowest this year. So far, China's peak building season has failed to ignite a recovery. Well, gee, I wonder why. Vale is a major swing factor on the supply side amid its slow recovery from a 2019 dam collapse. The firm cut annual production guidance in July, saying it was seeking greater flexibility due to market conditions. It needs to produce at least 83 million tons this quarter to reach the lower end of the guidance range. Seasonal factors mean production is usually stronger in the second half. On the base metals front, Vale saw nickel output jump 72% from the third quarter of last year, while copper grew 7.4%. The division was helped by the end of refinery maintenance in Canada, yay Canadians, and a better processing performance at Salobo in Brazil. To be sure, nickel sales lagged production because of low availability of containers for Brazilian production. I wonder where all these containers are. And shipping congestion at UK ports. The base metals division, which is recovering from several operational setbacks last year, is under spotlight as Vale takes advice on options to unlock value amid growing demand from the green energy transition. That could mean a spin-off that goes public or even a strategic partnership. A final decision is expected by the end of the year. A possible base metals turnaround was apparently one of the lures for a new key minority shareholder in Vale, sugarcane billionaire Rubens Olmedo. Through conglomerate Cosan SA, Olmedo just acquired a 4.9% voting stake, which he plans to raise to 6.5%. Good for the sugarcane dude. Very good for the sugarcane dude. Speaking of Pandaland, earlier this week, Lord Malarkey and his merry minions from the netherworld put out an order. Some sort of blah, blah, executive, blah, blah, shouldn't be done without Congress, blah, blah, most likely illegal type of order. They're rather common in DC for anyone who doesn't watch DC. And this order, after the last order that said that a whole lot of Chinese-made tech products could not be sold in the U.S. any longer, is now telling the panda people that a whole lot of semiconductor technology, semiconductor intellectual property, semiconductor stuff will no longer be sold in China. Some sort of sanction thingy widget, whatever. It's a sanction. It's a sanction on semiconductors. It is a sanction that is bad enough that an entire flotilla, a veritable brigade of American upper-level management and CEOs working in Chinese tech companies have conveniently decided to resign and get the fuck out of there. Gee, I just hope their COVID QR codes don't turn red and stick them in quarantine where they promptly disappear. But, I mean, it's not like we have a shortage of CEOs in this country anyway. So, with any luck, for the sake of their families, I hope they get out. But it should be noted, as was noted by some obscure magazine, it might have been the Federalist actually. Well, anyway, some fairly obscure magazine that actually still writes fairly coherent and fairly readable articles, pointed out that history doesn't repeat, but it sure as hell rhymes. Because they pointed out that way back in 1941, late spring, early summer 1941, the United States government was unaccountably pissed at a certain little island group of nations that we all know of as Japan. And so the United States government decided they were going to slap a bunch of sanctions on Japan so that, the Japanese would promptly behave. It is theorized that it was these sanctions, which, by the way, destroyed about 88% of trade to those islands that are pretty damn dependent on everywhere else in the world because they're freaking islands. It's pretty much considered a fact of history that was one of the main drivers that led to a certain very unpleasant surprise party in Hawaii in December the same year. So here we are looking at China. Pandaland currently is going through lockdown 712.3 in their quest for zero COVID. And we'll get back to the COVID in a few minutes because BU got involved in this now. They're currently in lockdowns all over the place again. QR codes all over the place. If your code turns yellow, you shelter in place. And if your code turns red, you disappear to a very large camp, and most of the video footage that has escaped shows that these places are relatively unpleasant by anybody's standards. We're talking a room for 2 to 3 people, the size of an average parking space, amongst other things. Well, China relies on a little place called Taiwan for about 60% of their semiconductor stuff. And there are noises being bruited about that Taiwan is going to be unwillingly dragged into this little mess as well. Now, China already has an ongoing slow train wreck of a real estate collapse happening. They have an ongoing slow train wreck of a financial collapse happening. They are banning all exports of fuel to anywhere else in the world this winter so that they, at least, don't freeze to death in the dark like certain other countries will. And they're not the kind of people that you want to back into a corner. Especially not since they recently celebrated the victory of Hong Kong becoming one China with China again. I feel sorry for the actual patriots and reasonable people who live in Hong Kong because their era of being the way they were is pretty much going to be over. It may take a while, but China's not going to let them continue to be what they are. And China is not going to want to let Taiwan continue to be what it is when they have to get their hands on computer technology. So they can sell some of it back to us, but so they can sell more of it to their other allies. Now, perhaps the goddess is just a little bit paranoid here, but it does seem oddly coincidental that our dearly beloved fearless leader and his merry minions from the netherworld are openly encouraging NATO to conduct their nuclear tests next week, to simulate attacks against a certain mad invader that everybody's really annoyed with at the moment. And we're simultaneously poking the panda by cutting off their main sources of revenue willy-nilly at a time when our own recession is causing exports and sales of Chinese stuff to begin to dry up. This is not exactly what I would consider to be reasonable foreign policy. But then again, considering that Lord Malarkey has pronounced that gas was always over $7 in California, it's never been lower, and our economy has never been stronger while he was eating ice cream. This was in between making inappropriate dating jokes with young girls. I probably am expecting a little bit too much in the way of foreign policy. But one does have to wonder how this is going to affect the precious metals markets. Because as we are seeing, there is every reason in the world for gold and silver to be going to the moon right now. We have the Great Green Agenda, which is going to use more silver than has ever been mined in history, even if we start substituting lesser metals for some of the things silver is used for now. We have the ever increasing dependence on tech, and tech runs on all kinds of exotic materials, plus is a very heavy industrial user of precious metals. We have the ever increasing drive toward electric cars and other ridiculous ideas that really are ridiculous ideas that also include a significant amount of precious metals. And yet, the prices are still in the doldrums. Well, gold prices have to stay in the doldrums, at least until the banks get enough to comply with Basel III, because banks and governments use gold. Why do they want to buy it at its actual price? When, look at this idea. Consider this theory, if you will. They buy a bunch of physical gold at yard sale prices. Then they say, well, we don't have enough, so, we need to move to digital currencies and we need to take over people's private ownership of gold, except for gold jewelry. And by the way, we're not going to let you mine it because it's not economically viable. Sorry. And then, once they figure they got that under control, they move toward price discovery after backing their debt with this gold. And magically, the debt disappears. These guys make debt disappear all kinds of ways. There's no reason why they couldn't do it that way. As to silver, silver does have a tremendous amount of industrial use, a tremendous amount of tech use, a tremendous amount of medical use. And it benefits those sectors to keep the price as low as absolutely practical. Because people going into a worldwide economic meltdown, recession, and depression all at the same time with stagflation and inflation aren't going to want to buy, $2,400 iPhones when they can't even afford to buy $1,100 iPhones or $9 a pound rice. So, yeah, there's a lot of reasons to keep the price down. But while it's on sale, buy it, because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And another interesting and rather bizarre news, at least the goddess found it rather bizarre. Apparently, There is a fuel shortage going on in France. Not that anyone here ever hears about it because, the media has a tendency not to give us news at all. But there's a fuel shortage going on in France. There's fuel shortages going on all over Europe. And apparently, the LNG ships, which have gone to an all-time high for renting one of them, are beginning to pile up off the European ports. And there's going to be a nationwide strike in France here coming up real shortly because the French are incensed. They're annoyed. They are pretty damn close to pissed off because their energy prices have more than doubled. In some places, they've quadrupled. Their food prices have gone up. Their wages have not gone up. And now they can't get gas. Like one half of the stations in France as a country are missing gasoline, which is a little difficult if you happen to own a gas station. It will be interesting to see whether this strike or this particular news ever breaks the national level in the United States in any meaningful way. The persistent riots in Haiti have not made the news. The persistent riots in Sri Lanka have not made the news. The persistent riots in Moldova and Belgium and certain parts of Germany and Austria have not made the news. The persistent riots in 4 or 5 African countries and a couple of South American countries, well, they haven't made the news either. They all have a couple of things in common besides not making the news. One of them is everybody is protesting inflation, wage stagnation, and high food prices and high fuel prices. But just so you know, we are definitely not in a recession according to our dearly beloved federal government. We're inching toward a recession. There is a heightened risk of a recession next year. I mean, after all, the core CPI only went up to about 8.4%. That's not important. Oh, and on that news, good news there. The government is changing the CPI formula calculation again. As of this coming year, instead of taking 2 years into account, it's only going to take 1 year into account. So guess what? That means our inflation is getting cut in half. Just like that. Isn't that wonderful? I'm just so thrilled. You know it's bad when Social Security is getting the largest increase ever in history. And I can tell you from doing the math, it's only about half of the inflation that has increased in this household in the last year. But maybe this year we'll break even instead of losing $16 a month. It could happen, I mean, it really could. Wouldn't count on it, but it really could. But that is where we are with Malarkey and Company. We have been told that our election is absolutely safe, especially since the DOJ is going to be strongly monitoring social media and reporting people for domestic terrorism that dare to question the whole process. We have been told that we are not in a recession. Absolutely, positively not. Totally, completely normal. In fact, our economy has never been healthier. It has come roaring back in a way that has never been seen in our history before. The New York Times thought up an entire new way to excuse Lord Malarkey's lies as anything but lies. They did a pretty good job. They got really creative. I mean, it was excellent use of language. It really was. Yeah, it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful winter. Buy more chicken. Bye. By the way, the banks are still forecasting $2,500 gold by the end of 2023 and $45 silver.
Oh, there should be stuff to do, Zioxio.
Oh, there's a meme for you. I identify as a conspiracy theorist. My pronouns are they and lied.
Walt says, "Hey, Eva, are you going to allow Keith to come to Arizona to look at a mine I'm interested in claiming? I need his expertise." Seems unlikely, Walt.
He can get a temporary travel visa if you guys are still in one piece after the election.
Yeah, let's wait till after the election. In 1 month, things may be changing. We shall see what we shall see. You know, Zioxio, no matter how much the government wants people to just lay there and take it, sometimes they don't. By the way, I would like you to know, little one, that when I was doing my rather boring monologue, we had like 14, 15 people watching, and now it's 24. You have kicked my butt. Yay! But anyhow, so let me take another quick look and see if anything has come in from the assay lab. Yes, something. Okay, he got them today. He'll get me some numbers ASAP. So that's good. Okay, so I should have some numbers before we head out. Now, what's going to hold us back is the damn tire, because it's supposed to be. Actually, a lot of those numbers there are people coming in, leaving, because at the end of the night, I'll check, and it's usually like over 100 people. There's been like 100 views by the end of the live stream. So a lot of people are coming in, listening, tuning out, or whatever. Not most of the people I recognize here, but there must be a lot of people just kind of floating in and out. Live assay results. Well, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to give you live assay results. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm a real ass, John. I say, I'm allowed to give some kind of general statements and such. Like notice when I was talking about the screening results on the dump, it was all relative. It wasn't directly. As a matter of fact, there was one time where I asked a mine owner if I could give some results on a video, and when I did, he got rather annoyed, and that was surprising to me, because I specifically asked, because that's a thing, and the results I gave were not that good. The particular spot where I actually gave results was not good grades, but he got upset. So I say it's one of those things. It really depends on the mine owner and like that. And I say it can vary a lot with small mine owners. They're usually less reluctant than larger ones, but nevertheless, I say it's one of those things where I'm trying to walk a fairly fine line, and also like these videos that I do. If I do a video and I show what I did that weekend or whatever, you're not the only people watching it. The mine owner is too, but he may also get um, an email that explains certain things in more detail, especially in terms of analysis and numbers and things like that. So there's a lot of stuff you guys are not allowed to see that I try and be as open as I can, but there is stuff that goes on behind the scenes. Absolutely, we do have a mine owner that is much more open than some, so that's a good thing. But yeah, it's it's an interesting place that I walk because the other thing is this YouTube channel gives me access to a lot of knowledge and brain power. You know, you're looking at Rock and Chris and Tricky Dicky and like that that I don't have on my own. You know, I'm not terribly worried, Adam. Um, because first of all, I've got my Social Security. My expenses are pretty modest. If I want to, I can hunker down and maintain shelter, utilities, and food. I wouldn't be doing much, but I can do that just on the Social Security. There's um, quite a lot of there's a labor shortage here in Helena. I mean, I could go work at the what is that right up the street there? Burger King?
Burger King or Carl's Jr.
Yeah, Burger King.
$18 an hour for shift leaders at Hardee's.
Yeah, I mean, I could get $15 an hour, just working at the burger joint,
$14
four
an
blocks
hour
up the
plus
street,
a discount at Winco.
So I'm not terribly worried about that.
If we get jobs, we're going to Winco.
I've also got situations like with Lauren and Jim and the claim owner here that there's various other things besides mining that need to be done during the wintertime that I can probably stay moderately busy at least without too much trouble. Um, and so I'm really not concerned about how busy I'm going to be this winter. I think I'll be busy enough without too much difficulty. We're also going to be doing a lot of experiments on the resin and things like that. We'll do a lot more lab work, probably mostly at Lauren's shop because it's heated. But as I say, there's lots of work to do, and then there's repair and maintenance work. We need to go through the Stutenroth and hard face some stuff, etc. I'd like to take the RC46. Lauren, are you still here? And tear it apart and see how things are going in terms of wear and tear. But also, I'd like to put some kind of shells on the rollers. A lot of people have commented that that's one of the problems with the RC46. The rollers themselves, what?
Forgot to mention the Saudis are looking at joining BRICS, and BRICS is working hard on building their metals based and commodities basket backed currency.
Guess what happens to the petrodollar?
But
thank you, Brandon.
One of the things that people are concerned about with an RC40 is, of course, the jaw plates, and we think we've got a solution for that that's a lot more durable and reasonably priced. compared to the ones that are factory. The rollers, those are $500 each for a new roller. So for a set, it's $1,000. Last I checked, current prices is probably more like $1,200 each, $1,200 for a set. But you should be able to wear them down to a certain point. They're currently 1/4 of an inch thick. They could probably go to 5/16. Anything more than that, I'm not sure. But a 1/4 inch is what we got, Dan. But if there's a certain size of rollers where we can get some kind of alloy pipe, something that's a little tougher than just regular steel, where we can get alloy tubing. And I was thinking of putting a spiral cut in it so that you can press it on the roller. Once the roller wears down to a certain size, you press that, sleeve, yeah, on there, and it just expand a little bit at the gap. But because of the spiral gap, it's not going to be in any one particular place. It's not going to go bonk, 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 bonk. And then just weld it to the rollers on the outside. I don't know if you need to weld the gap and grind that flush. That would make it a lot more difficult. But I'm thinking that if you got it right, to where okay, wait till it wears down to this amount, then shut it down, pull the rollers, press a new sleeve on there, and run till that sleeve's worn out, then grind the welds on the sides, press a new sleeve on there like that. I think that would work out reasonably well. But that might be the best. I say we need to think about it, and but you guys cannot move. Okay. But anyhow, so that's another thing I'd like to do this winter. We got the resin stuff to do. I got work to do on my truck. Lauren has some potential jobs to do that are mainly inside jobs that we may do. So there's just a number of things. So I'm not terribly worried about being bored, and I'm not worried about finances and necessities unless everything goes to complete hell, in which case everything becomes inherently unpredictable.
Oh,
6-inch
I
diameter.
forgot to get back to COVID, didn't
Chris.
I? Boston University apparently made a super COVID, 80% mortality. Isn't that cool?
Any research products? Getting the gold out of the resin is definitely a research project, very
yes.
high priority.
I have a pile of research projects.
We have a number of things in terms of lixiviants, etc. And Eva, we want to get the assaying up and running, and then assuming we get assaying. Yeah, blind sight. Sure it is. Absolutely. Which is why nothing illegal ever happens in the United States. Yep. That's pretty good, Poker Face. Yes, Adam, that is the plan, to have our own assay lab. The speed and cost issues are just huge improvements. let us say that we were at the mine. And last weekend I took a number of samples, okay, which I did. And we needed assays. Now, if Eva was set up and capable of doing those assays reliably, then we could have done them 7. Where we got? Calculator. There
It
it is.
takes 2 hours from start to finish.
Just a minute. Okay. How much do you say per assay and consumables and stuff? Little one, couple bucks?
Oh, less than that, yeah.
If you use a new crucible each time?
If I use a new crucible each time, that would really add up. They come out to about $10 a piece.
Okay, new crucible each time, $10 a piece. Are you sure?
If I use the porcelain ones,
Well, I didn't say the porcelain ones. Goodness gracious!
I don't know what the regular ones cost.
It was like 24 of them for $130. What is that? $6 each?
Yeah.
$5 each? Somewhere around there.
Let me put it this way: all consumables would be less than $10, even if I don't reuse crucibles.
Yeah. So I say our actual consumables cost would drop to below $10 per assay, and the time to get the assay done goes from a week and a half to 2 days.
I can do an assay.
Well, now when you got 6 in a row with what you've currently got,
Yeah.
you know. So I say that would allow us to do stuff so much easier. But yeah, and there would be some shipping cost savings too, Dan. But that would allow us to do a lot of stuff we can't do right now. Another thing that we could theoretically do right now that would cut our cost dramatically would be to use bottle rolls. We could take the sample and do a 500-gram bottle roll for 24 hours and then take it to the local analytical lab. And then the turnaround time is about a week at that lab. And we got a much bigger sample. And we're getting, we're actually analyzing how much we can recover. Okay. So, blind sight, not sure how that assay stuff works. Well, would you like me to give you a quick little detail? Okay. Now, of course, everything is a lot more complex in reality than the basics, but I can certainly do that. And as I say, it might be interesting enough to enough other people here. But yeah, we're trying to get, an assay lab set up and go from there. So, it would be nice to have that capacity, and it would also mean that we could theoretically do assays for other people. Okay, blindside, I will. Just a second. And that gives us another possible income stream. Okay? So we have all these different things. And also by having the ability to do a bottle roll test, that also makes life interesting. So I will go ahead and do yeah, I know exactly what you're talking, Rock Butcher. So let's see. How does fire assay work? Okay. Let me get some stuff here. Okay. You start out. Can you see that? Not very well. Stage 1. Take sample. That sounds real simple. It's not. In order to get a representative sample, there's certain things you need to do. It depends on what you're sampling, etc. For example, if you've got a vein, you need to cut a channel all the way across the vein at a consistent depth and a consistent width to get a reasonable assay. The next thing you need in this sample is, all else being equal, the bigger the sample, the better. Because gold is valuable in such small quantities and it comes in discrete sized particles, the smaller the sample you have, the more likely that the particles that you get in that sample are not the average of the bulk material. So taking a sample is a bit tricky. From there, you need to reduce the sample. Again, sounds simple. In reality, it's a lot more complex. You need to crush the sample so you got a bunch of small particles. Then you need to use some kind of a device to split the sample into representative fractions. There's something called a Jones splitter that has chutes like this. And as you pour the sample in the top, half goes one way and half goes the other. And then you take one of those halves and you do that again, and now you've got a quarter. And you do that again, now you've got an eighth. That's probably about the simplest way. There's other ways of doing it, coning and quartering, stuff like that. You need to reduce the sample because you only assay a small fraction.
29.166 grams
Depending on what you're doing.
is one assay ton.
Okay. Typically about 15 to 30 grams is all that you actually test. Depending upon the type of analysis and the coarseness of the gold and stuff, this can vary, but these are the usual sizes. They're in the 15 to 30 grams. And then you knock your lab over. Okay. Yeah, Rock Butcher says they usually go with 30 to 52 grams.
Yep.
Okay. Again, and that's fine. Again, bigger sample is better. But the labs I've used, this is generally what they do. So now you finally got it crushed, split, pulverized, resplit, and using all these techniques, gotten it down to a fairly small representative sample of rock. Okay. If you're doing placer, forget it. The gold particles are too big for this to work. Okay. Just take my word
That's
for
a
it.
different kind of fire assay, but it is done.
First, you have to concentrate it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, once you got this 15 to 30 grams, we're just going to go to fire assay here. And wet chemical assay here. Okay. They're the two major. Fire assay is the usual one. In this, you add flux. Now, flux is a number of dry powdered chemicals that you blend together to create certain conditions when you melt all this in a high temperature furnace. Well, high temperature for most people, moderate temperature for furnaces. Anyhow, this is generally going to have borax, silica, and soda ash to help things melt. And then there's another big ingredient, which is litharge, which is lead oxide.
You can also use bismuth.
You can also use bismuth. I'm trying to keep it simple, I said. Okay. Now, you also need a reducing agent. If your ore is naturally reducing, it's got some sulfides or things like that, you may not need the reducing agent. In the case of many ores, you have to add it. This is generally just ordinary flour, wheat flour. Okay. Let's see. So, what happens when you melt this in the furnace? The litharge combined with the reducing agent produce lead, liquid lead. The lead is distributed. All this stuff is blended together before you put it in the crucible. That liquid lead collects the gold and silver and in some cases platinum group, etc. And then this forms, you take all of this, you pour it into a cone mold. The lead goes to the bottom and the flux floats on top. And you now have a lead button that, if everything else is done properly, will contain your precious metals. This also has a lot of complexity. Getting the right flux mixture for the particular ore you have can be complicated. Okay. And so I know I was going to get to that in a minute, Rock. Now, this lead button has all your precious metals, and now you want to get them out of that. So the first thing you do is you put that lead button on something called a cupel, and you put it back in the furnace. In this case, it must be an oxidizing furnace. It must have oxygen going in there. The lead melts, oxidizes, and the lead oxide gets absorbed into the cupel while the lead sits on top. It's repelled by the cupel. It does not wet the cupel. This is usually made out of bone ash, but you can even use things like Portland cement. Okay? From here, you now wind up with a bead. That bead contains your precious metals. If you've got at least 3 or 4 times as much silver in your ore as gold,
2.5.
that will work just fine for the next step. If not, if you don't anticipate that, you have to add a little bit of silver, a very carefully weighed amount of silver, into all this mixture so that when you get to this bead, it has enough silver for the next step. And for that, you do what they call parting, nitric acid. You weigh this bead here. Okay? Then you put that bead, you typically will flatten it, put it in nitric acid, hot dilute nitric acid. That'll dissolve the silver and some of the other impurities that may or may not be in there, although this should be very small at this point, leaving you with gold. I'm deliberately ignoring all the other platinum group metals at this time for the people out there who know that it can get even more complicated. Okay? But at this point, now you've got this gold debris. You take that and refurnace it and turn it into a bead. And then you weigh the bead. This tells you how much gold, and this tells you gold and silver. The difference is the silver. You have to subtract the amount that you deliberately put in, if any. That is called an in-quart. The stuff you deliberately add would be an in-quart. As you can see, this is a rather complex process. When you're using an assay ton of ore, which is how much, little one?
29.166 grams.
29.166 grams of ore. You will get, at 1 ounce per ton in the ore, 1 milligram, or 0.001 grams of gold. That's why you use this really weird number up here, is because then your gold in milligrams gives you ounces per ton. 1/1000th of a gram is difficult to measure. You need special scales for that. In our case, we can use a little, hello, where are you? Yeah, there we go. A little pocket microscope here that will allow you to measure the size of the bead. There's a little scale, a little reticle in there, and you can see the size of the bead. You can measure down to 1/1000th of an inch sizes. And that will allow you to detect gold in the original ore down to, I don't know, 100th of an ounce, something like that per ton. Actually, this is exactly what they did in the 1700s, Shaggy. You know, it's been around a long time. The difference is scales are a lot cheaper than they used to be. This is what a fire assay is. You actually take the rock, melt it under certain conditions, and literally extract the gold. Okay? Fire assay would work on large quantities. It would just be horrendously expensive. Therefore, it's not done.
I know how to do it though.
Please, can you say, did you have to smelt after pouring? You have to reheat it.
It's
Okay.
called annealing.
You can use annealing, or in our case, sometimes what we do is you take this debris, put it in a little lead foil packet, and put it on a little cupel and re-cupel it. But whichever you have to do, you wind up with this final bead that you weigh. Now, Eva, up till now, has been assaying resin. And the resin, if you start with 25 grams of wet resin, you typically get about 12.5 grams of dry resin, yields somewhere around 0.3 to 0.4 grams of gold. Yes, I'm not joking. 0.3 to 0.4 grams out of 12.5 grams of resin. This stuff is running like 1.5 to 2% gold. Again, we could do that for large quantities. It would be slow and expensive. We need something faster and cheaper to improve the economics of the situation. But this is what she's mainly been doing. These beads are easy to measure by using a milligram scale, one that goes down to 1/1000th of a gram, plus or minus 1 or 2 thousandths. You can see we're well in the range here. You know, she'll get numbers like 0.316, you know, round to 0.232. So now that she's going for ore, she's going to have to be able to detect much lower quantities, and that is going to be requiring the optical method, because a real precision balance runs $10,000 and needs to be on a very stable pedestal. Yes, Rock is absolutely correct. They did the same procedure. They just didn't have as good as scales. Yes. Dan, they might have 1.1 milligram scale for under $500, but even the little scale we got, which is a 1 milligram scale, if you just move your hand over it, the static electricity will change the number. You have to have a very stable environment to measure it in. That usually means a very big, heavy base, like, a 2 by 2 foot, 4 foot tall concrete pedestal.
In a glass case.
And then you have to have a glass case and a few other things. Okay, Adam, when you do the fire assay process, you're actually recovering the gold from the ore, and it winds up in a bead. So you can say we got this much gold from this amount of rock, and you weigh that amount of gold. And the scale has to be very delicate because you're not typically going to get very much gold from an assay ton, 29.166 grams of rock. If you use 29.166 grams of sample, 1 milligram of gold equals 1 ounce per ton. 0.12 milligrams equals 0.12 ounces per ton.
A tenth of a milligram equals a tenth of an ounce.
Yeah. Assay. So that's how it tells you how to get it. I mean, you're actually extracting it and weighing it. It's just on a very small scale. You can do a lot of these with a good sized furnace and the right equipment. One assayer could do what? 50, 100 assays a day?
Yes, in mill production back in the 20s and 30s, the goal was 100 assays a day.
Per operator.
Per operator.
Yeah. 100 assays per day per operator.
If you got an assay run in the morning, you were supposed to have it done before lunch.
What controls the size of the sample? First of all, you can't have a sample bigger than the crucible you're going to melt it in. Okay? That is a limiting factor. The crucible can't be any bigger than the furnace you're measuring in. The reason you use this weird ass number, 29.166 grams, is only so that when you weigh the bead in milligrams, that tells you in ounces per ton. If you wanted parts per million, you could go 30 grams. Wouldn't be a problem. Exactly. Okay. And we don't need to right now, Dan. Yes, this is the standard in the industry. Absolutely. The lab has to be careful not to get cross-contamination, not to take this sample and do unrepresentative processing so that the processing doesn't introduce an error, etc. One lab I used said that if I gave them a sample, I forget what the thing was, but I mean, if it was super rich sample, like some of Tricky stuff, there would be an additional $2,000 or $3,000 fee to clean up the line to prevent cross-contamination of further samples. Because if you've got some people looking for ore in the half a part per million range, which is not unusual, and you're getting 2,000 parts per million in your sample, you can see just a little bit of contamination can totally fuck up the next guy's stuff. So that's, that's one of the things that the lab has to do. It's a lot of it is sample preparation has to be done properly. Also, you're using lead here. Well, when you are furnacing lead, you're creating some lead vapors. Those are bad things to breathe. So you have to have controls to prevent getting dust, this lead oxide dust into your body, to get lead vapors into your body, things like that. You have nitric acid here. Well, that's relatively hazardous. So there's a number of things you have to do for safety. But it's a relatively complex process. But the big advantage of this is it's all pretty low tech, with the exception of weighing the bead, and even that can be pretty low tech. This microscope, even with this is an illuminator here, that was about $70. Okay. So oh no, it wasn't that it's too rich, you need to pay us extra. It's too rich, it's contaminated our production line. I say, so there's a lot of details here. This works on very fine gold. That's why it does not work on placer gold. Placer gold is too coarse for this procedure.
Entirely different fire assay
to
technique for
give you good results. It doesn't matter. You don't even fire assay it, little one. You fire assay placer concentrates, not placer. Okay. So this is simply not going to give you any kind of statistically useful results on placer. Okay. And when you part with the nitric, do you get the silver back? Yes, you can. We reuse our silver. It's not quite as precise that way. But if you take your nitric acid and neutralize it, there's a number of ways where you can boil it several times to drive off the nitrates and stuff. But as I say, you get it to where it's neutral, and then just put a piece of copper in it. The silver will precipitate out. Yep. Well, it's distributed in much larger particles. The ore that I've got, the stuff here, the gold is 2,000 mesh. And to give you an idea, 2,000 mesh would be 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000. So what's that? 1 billion particles of mine to get one 20 mesh particle. That's why this stuff can be assayed and placer can't, So that's the problem with placer. It's just too big. If you can gravity recover it, it's too big in general to assay. Now, then we get to something called a wet chemical assay. And this is an entirely different method. And it requires modern instruments to do with precision. Okay? Now, there are some inexpensive assay kits out there where basically you take your sample, and of course, all the rules of sampling come into account. You take it, you crush it, you pulverize it, you split it down, and then you add a lixiviant. Which is a fancy name for a solvent. Something that will dissolve the gold, or whatever it is you're trying to find. Now, this can be a fairly selective lixiviant, like, say, cyanide, or in our case, Eco-Goldex, or it can be a non-selective lixiviant, like Aqua Regia. It allows you to do different things depending upon what you do. And then, like these cheap assay kits, you put in a precipitant, And as the gold precipitates, it changes the color of solution, and you kind of guess as to how good it was. Okay? But in the standard procedures, you take the Lixivant and you run it through an instrument. And I just happened to be talking to the lab guy this week. A brand new atomic absorption spectrophotometer would be about $25,000. A brand new ICP without mass spec, that was $125,000. And an ICP mass spectrograph would be, I think it was 200,000, something like that. As you can see, these are not cheap instruments. What they do is they allow you to put this solution into them, and it will tell you how much gold is in the solution. This is what the lab that we use uses, the ICP spectrographic, not mass spec, but photometric. Okay. And again, there's some laboratory procedures involved to get you good results. But as you can see, this is not cheap. It requires somebody who's trained in this equipment. This part is pretty simple. The actual dissolving of the sample is pretty simple. One thing that this allows you to do that the fire assay does not is you can detect other elements also. When you see one of these 30 element analyses or 50 element analyses, they're using probably an ICP, okay? Because it can do all of those. I mean, this guy over here, we could have him do a whole lot of other stuff at the same time. The machine will just run the sample and do give us a lot of results all at once. You know? If where is on detail without what do they call that? A difference without something with a distinction without a difference. Yeah. Yep. But anyhow, let's say, so there's all sorts of things. Now there's another thing too that's used now called XRF. This is not usually very useful in precious metals ores. Okay. XRF stands for X-ray fluorescence. You have an X-ray source that bombards the sample. The sample absorbs the X-rays and re-emits them at specific frequencies depending on the atoms that absorbed the X-rays. The problem with precious metals is 1 ounce per ton is like 1 part in 40,000. Roughly. Chris will probably correct me on my rough numbers here. So that means you got 40,000 other atoms sending off signals for every 1 gold atom. That's a horrible signal to noise ratio. That's like trying to listen to one conversation in a crowd of 40,000 people and getting the words right. It's very difficult, okay, to do that. And the ICP can do real good signal to noise ratios. The XRF doesn't, but if you got like concentrates. Or you're looking at base metals. Then it could be useful because, for example, copper is not going to be economically useful unless you're up over 1/100th of 1%. So that's 1 part to 1,000. Okay. We sent some resin samples to Rock Butcher, which are kind of like concentrate, and they were into the full percentage points of gold. So your signal to noise ratio was much better, and he gave us some really interesting results. This is not usually very good in prospecting or ore control or things like that. It just doesn't do a good job. Okay. No, let's see. You can't find it to use gold in a placer like they did in Gold Rush. I don't know. In Gold Rush, I've seen them do pans. That's about it. But I say that's, again, you're concentrating a lot into a little and then visually identifying it. Yeah, the ICP is used a lot for water analysis, which is what this guy that is locally here was using. That's what he typically does, wells and water quality. There's a lot of things that require testing by law. If you're selling a house that has a well, that has to be tested, things like that. So they stay busy doing that. And the equipment will run gold. He has to have a specific standard to calibrate the machine, but that's basically it. So he does that and uses the same machine. If you're in an area like the gentleman in Oregon was looking at doing, he was planning on making a concentrate, gravity concentrate of his ore, and then leaching it with Eco Goldex potentially. But then how do you tell what's in the Eco Goldex? Well, this does just fine for that. Now, there's something known as a bottle roll. And what that does is, and we got some right here. Sorry, I can't show you my actual roller very easily. Take a bottle like this, and you put a sample in it, and in our case, we use our leaching solution. This is often done when you're doing leaching tests. So you'd be using like your cyanide solution, your Eco Goldex or whatever, and then you put it on something very similar to a rock tumbler, and you let it run for a day. Then you take it out and you have the solution analyzed. What's really good about a bottle roll is, first of all, it tells you what your solution is going to do to the ore from that sample. Okay? And as such, that's what you really care about in the long run. Comparing that to the assay of what's in the ore, your fire assay tells you what good your recovery is. But if you're using, in our case, Eco Goldex, it doesn't matter if the Eco Goldex can't get it. We aren't going to get it. Okay. And so one advantage of a bottle roll is this is a 500 gram sample we run in here. This is, what would that be? I don't know, 15 assay tons or something. So that gives you better statistics, but also tells you how well your leaching system is likely to recover that gold.
582 grams would be a 20-ton assay.
20 assay ton? Okay. Yeah. So again, it's over 15. That's one of the big advantages of a bottle roll. Also, I could take a sample, bottle roll it, take it to the lab there, and for $25, I got a more statistically significant and more directly representative sample, number of what I'm going to get than by having a fire assay run. Okay. And so there's different methods that work better for different situations. The XRF is real simple and easy and not horribly priced compared to some of these other things, but it simply doesn't work on ore, or at least most ore. Okay. You're talking concentrates or base metals, things like that. If you're out there like what Jim's doing, where they have a polymetallic deposit where they're looking for copper and zinc and tin and lead and things like that, then yeah, an XRF is very helpful to the geologists in the field. They can literally push a handheld gun up against a rock and get a fairly good idea of what the major constituents are in it. But the precision is not there. Okay, that'll all be backed up, but for precious metals, XRF is pretty much useless. So I hope that was helpful in explaining a lot of the analyses methods we use. And that's literally just a real quick overview. Okay. That is not much detail at all. And as they like to say, the devil's in the details. So when you get into actually doing these analyses, there's a lot of things that can screw you up.
Like copper.
Well, yeah, but there's lots of things. One advantage of a fire assay, assuming it's done properly, so there's no cross-contamination, you do not get a false positive. When you wind up with a little gold bead, it had to come from the ore. If everything else is properly done, you're not reusing crucibles and things like that, that there's at least that much. Now, there could be more than that in there because the procedure might have missed some, but you're not going to be less than that. On the other hand, things like an ICP or an atomic absorption spectrograph, those can give you a false negative. They can actually give you a false positive. They can see something else and think it's gold. Okay. I was with a guy one time, he had an XRF gun. We were checking rock. He was saying I had 1 ounce to the ton platinum. Well, that was a false positive. There was no platinum in there. But because it's an indirect method, it's not actually measuring something you extracted. It can mistake something else for it. The fire assay will not give you a false positive. It can give you a false negative if it's not done right or not done right for that ore. It can only give you a false positive if there's cross-contamination of some sort. So, whereas all the others can give you false positives and false negatives. Can gold become radioactive from uranium or nuclear fallout? My thought is if you have enough neutron exposure, gold can become radioactive. Virtually everything can be if you give it enough neutrons, if it's a big enough atom. But how much so, I don't know. You probably would have to have so much fallout to actually make the gold radioactive, not to contaminate the outside so that the gold bar is radioactive, but it's because there's fallout on the outside of it. That can always happen. But to make the gold itself radioactive, I think by then you'd be long dead. Okay. And that's actually another form of analysis too, is neutron activation analysis, where they take a sample, put it next to a nuclear reactor, bombard the hell out of it with neutrons, and then move it to a separate detection chamber where they detect the induced radiation. That also does a lot of different elements at once. I don't think it's that good for gold and silver, but I'm not sure. Anyone cross-check me? Rock, Chris? Does neutron activation work well on gold ores? Okay. Neutron activation works well on gold ore. Okay, but it takes weeks. Yeah. Again, this is one of those things, and nobody can afford to buy a nuclear reactor and park it in their lab. There's a few places on the planet that have these reactors that are designed to do exactly this, and you ship it to them. I used to have that done occasionally, but it was a little more expensive and slower than getting the wet chemical assay that was the standard where I was at. The lab I was doing used a wet chemical method in general. The neutron activation I would use kind of as a backup, because it would also give me a good cross check on the precious metal, but also I get a lot of other stuff too.
I want one of those machines.
So anyhow, there you go. A bunch of different methods for doing stuff. As a practical matter, the fire assay is the only one an ordinary person can set up to do at a reasonable price. You can do something called a torch assay, where you use an oxyacetylene torch and a little graphite. I think generally they just use a piece of charcoal, and they use like a 1 gram sample and fuse it in that and that sort of thing. It gives you a small bead, but again, with optical methods, you can, it's useful. And I know Jason De Luisa had a couple videos where he did that. And I say that's an inexpensive method. Your sample size is real small, so that's not the best you can do. But a lot of small assays cheap can sometimes be better than a very few assays expensive. Depends on your budget. But a torch assay, I think, takes like 30 minutes, something like that. What would I use for carbonates containing gold? Question. How coarse is the gold? If it's coarse enough, I'd go ahead and crush and gravity separate. If it's real fine, the Eco Goldex should work just fine. It works in a basic environment. Cyanide would work on carbonates as long as you don't have carbon in there. But you couldn't use, for example, an acid thiourea leach solution. There's a number of leaching solutions, but the carbonates mean that if you tried to use any kind of an acid solution, you're going to use a lot of acid. And as Chris said, if you got really rich, chunky gold, you could just dissolve it for specimen gold. But if it's, just 100 mesh, 50 mesh like that, just crush it and gravity concentrate it. If you've got a blend where you got some carbonates and you got some coarse gold, say 50 mesh, and then you got some that's 500 mesh or whatever, then you're probably going to do a 2-stage process where you crush it, you run it through a gravity circuit, and then you leach it. If you're talking black shales, those aren't that much of a carbonate, but for that, you're not going to use cyanide because the cyanide complex is absorbed on the carbon. You could potentially use a thiosulfate leach. Is that the thio complex of gold doesn't absorb very well onto the carbon, and you would use an ion exchange resin extraction with a thiosulfate leach. That would be the general way if it was microfine gold. If it was simply fine gold, as in 100 mesh or like that, yeah, you can crush and gravity separate. Most hard rock is not. Yeah, carbonaceous is different from carbonates, correct. But yes, if it's got carbon in it, then you're probably going to have to go to a thio leach. Okay. That is cheaper than roasting the ore to oxidize the carbon. But for all ores, hard rock ores, if the gold's coarse enough, crushing and gravity separation is usually the cheapest, fastest, simplest way to go about it. It's rarely that good with hard rock ores because there's usually a substantial amount of very fine gold that doesn't want to gravity separate. It's too fine. In our case, that's like 80% of the gold. Yeah, in general, rock, but if you got to do a thio leach, it doesn't work there either. You got to use resin. Have a good night, David. So yeah, I say because the carbon doesn't grab cyanide well, but not thio, you can't use activated carbon to recover the gold from a thio circuit. You need to use a resin. But if you got a high carbon ore, you're not going to get anything without it. So these are some of the complexities. That's why they have people with letters after their names that get paid big bucks to figure all this stuff out. And then when they make a mistake, they blame it on us. Every good plan needs a scapegoat. So yeah, this is why these big mining projects cost so much to test, because there's so many things that can go wrong. The thiosulfate is like photo fixer. The Eco Gold X it's a complex chemical. Chris is better. He's more knowledgeable about the details of it than I am. But I believe a substantial amount of the Eco Gold X dissolving action on the rock yields a gold cyanide complex. It's just that instead of using cyanide, it uses a ferrocyanide ion as the source of the cyanide for the complex. So that's my understanding of it. I know that it's kind of complicated because they take several chemicals, mix them together, and then furnace them, and the patents have a range of different things and blah, blah, blah. So you need a good analytical chemist to take a look at the actual details of what you're getting. That sounds like a good description, Chris. So, it's a little complicated with the EGX. That's one of the problems. One reason we may be seeing these big losses, but not 100% losses, because we got two different complexes, and one of the complexes is pretty volatile and the other one isn't. Okay. Don't know. Now, Xioxio's got some people in Butte interested, and that might answer a lot of our questions in the long run. Yeah, Chris, but there's an old saying, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. If you've got it so complicated that nobody can figure out what's really going on, it covers up for what's really going on. You know, because then everyone's like, well, how does it work? Well, we don't know. So I really haven't the faintest at this point. You know, this is all chemistry, which I'm relatively poorly equipped to handle. I can do some real basic chemistry.
I'm working on it.
But yeah, I say Chris is a lot more knowledgeable than I am, and there's people a lot more knowledgeable than Chris out there when it comes to chemistry. So we're kind of like some guy who's a parts changer trying to fix an engine when we don't really know how to do it. So we're trying a little of this, and we'll adjust that screw there, and we'll see what happens when we do this, and does the noise get louder or quieter, that sort of thing. Does that mist go away when I change that part? Yeah.
Give me a month in a real lab and I might be able to do something.
Well, you need to have the theory first. Say, we need someone who's really smart at this to really teach us. But anyhow, that's kind of where we're at. But from a practical standpoint, with our ore, it dissolves the gold, it puts it in the resin. Now we're just trying to get it out of the resin efficiently with minimal losses and low cost, high throughput. Those are the things. We have a way that does it with pretty good efficiency, but it's low throughput, high cost. Basically, we're fire assaying it. So I say that's what we're trying to do. We're actually breaking trail here in some ways. And it makes it interesting, but man, it can make it frustrating. What Chris is talking about is the Eco Gold X is made up of several different things. And he's saying, well, why don't we try just one thing against the ore and then add one other thing and see how that works. And then take the other thing out and put in a different other thing.
I'm all in favor.
And like that.
If I had a real lab, that's how I'd tackle it.
Take care, John. So yeah, I say it's pretty much above my educational level. I'm learning a lot. I'm having a good time. I'm really glad to have some help, you know. So I say we shall see what we shall see.
Well, it's also above our equipment level.
Oh yeah, and our budget.
I mean, really, if we had a Jacob's ladder, we'd be much better off.
Yeah, sure.
You never know. It might stabilize the gold. And then I'd be laughing my butt off.
Yep.
I mean, we haven't tried subjecting the wet resin to.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the sodium chloride electrolysis of the resin here shortly, Chris. You take care, Blind Sight.
Well, you see, what I'm envisioning is we get the Jacob's ladder. It lets out a huge electromagnetic field, right? So we expose the resin in the chamber with the Jacob's ladder to the huge electromagnetic field. Et voila!
Chris says, making nitric acid with a Jacob's ladder is terribly inefficient, I'm afraid.
I wasn't going to try making nitric with the Jacob's ladder, but, you know.
But anyhow.
I do want to make nitric, though.
Say, we're going to be trying a number of things and seeing what we can get to work. And That's what you get, he's saying.
Do you think the resin would turn into nitric acid?
Probably not.
Okay then.
Probably you'd have huge vaporization losses as it gets vaporized. Okay. Little one, do you want to cover for a minute? I need to take a short break. Oh.
Okay, so Barrett just gave me a great idea. We built the Jacob's ladder. We put it inside a nice case. We stick the wet resin in the case with it. When the wet resin vaporizes, it goes to the scrubber that's attached to the case with the Jacob's ladder, and voila, we get everything. Yeah, I know. That wouldn't work well either, huh? Well, at least we'd end up with nitric acid. And here I was looking at getting nitric acid the old school way.
The resin into the carbon arc.
Exactly, Rock Butcher. Jacob's ladder, according to Rock Butcher, who's an expert, Jacob's ladders are in use at all gold operations in North America. So I should use one too. What could possibly go wrong? Lars, you just got to be a party pooper, huh? Well, then how about a Van de Graaff generator? I wouldn't mind having one of those.
That might actually have some.
That might have some potential.
Electrostatic separation potentials.
Yeah, exactly. I just want the cool lab stuff so I can stand there and yell, "It's alive! It's alive, I tell you!"
Well, what I was saying, again, if you're just going to vaporize it, a carbon arc might be a good way of doing that, and then scrub the vapors from the carbon arc furnace, Don't know, but that would definitely vaporize it. Guarantee you that.
I'm just in favor of stuff that allows me to act like a mad scientist.
How about just an annoyed lab tech?
Well, I do have a lab assistant. I never see the dude, but I believe his name is Murphy.
Yeah. Where's the fun with that? Anyhow. Okay. Anything else? Make even an electromagnetic can crusher. I'm not even sure how it works, but I've got kind of a vague idea.
That sounds cool.
Induced
I would like that.
currents and magnetic fields.
I'm in favor of this idea. If we're going to be doing real science, I also want a side of mad science.
Good. You have a little thing where you put your aluminum can and then you push a button and it goes crunch.
I want one. That sounds so freaking cool.
Yep.
Can I then subject the aluminum to heat to melt it and fuse it into a little tiny hockey puck?
A single aluminum can would not make a very big hockey puck.
I said a little miniature hockey puck. A little tiny hockey puck.
Anyhow.
Aluminum cans weigh slightly less than a half an ounce.
Was that mad scientist prospecting, Jeff? But anyhow. Okay. Yeah, we could also play with smelting copper and stuff this winter too. Take care, Dan. Yeah, that's what I thought. Stuart's a nice guy. Like to meet him someday, but it'll be a while at this rate. But he seems pretty cool. I learned some editing tricks from him. Not that he taught me directly, but just watching him, I thought, wow, that works. It's a little odd, but it works really well. I like that. So he helped me out even when he wasn't trying to. He's a nice guy. Oh, okay. Any other question? Yeah, but you get a lot of ozone with the Jacob's ladder too, Chris, besides just the heat.
Maybe the ozone would do something.
It can, but it wouldn't be very well controlled from a Jacob's ladder.
Rat.
Yeah. You mean the casting. Yeah, exactly. The casting and stuff. Sure. Although Lauren has an exhaust thing for his larger furnace. Anyhow. Any other questions? Any other comments? We'll try, blind dude. What kind of filter do I like? For what? Filtering which? You're talking to get solids out of solutions. I prefer a centrifuge. If you're talking for filtering the exhaust gases to get the gold, probably a water filter. And probably with a little sodium hydroxide in it, because that's what somebody suggested who did gold refining. All righty, everybody. If nobody's got anything else, I think I'm going to call it a night. So thanks for showing up, everybody. Thanks for the interesting questions and stuff. Sorry I don't have any answers for you, but we're working on it. It's been a busy week, just dealing with other crap. So happy prospecting and keep it safe out there. Thanks, Rock. Thanks for staying up late. It was about midnight where you're at, I think. Anyhow, y'all take care and have a good week. See you later.